you can do 3 exercises and get really good from there. If I had to do it over again, that's what I would have done.
That's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Everybody, welcome to episode number 3, The Wild with Walker Show. I am here with my personal trainer, Pate Young. Pate is a trainer for over 25 years. He is a recovering bodybuilder, a certified strength and conditioning specialist. He has trained Olympic athletes, cancer patients, professional polo players, you name it. His wife's name is also Hannah Curley Young. She and her sister were both the winners of the 11th season of The Biggest Loser. And she was also recently on the Jillian Michaels podcast. And so they are the fitness, health, wellness, fat loss, power couple of America.
Yeah, I'm a big deal because my wife is a big deal, basically, is what he's saying.
The Wild with Walker Show is brought to you by my production company, your new video production company, Huck Studio, and also the equipment you see behind us, Surplus Strength, manufactured here in Nashville, Tennessee. I forgot Jason's tagline. Oh, well.
Far from average, I think.
Far from average.
Far from average,
like
something like that.
I'm not a very good sponsored podcast host, I guess. Pate, earlier you told me that you are no longer a trainer, you're a coach. Tell me what that means.
Okay. So in my career, I started off as a personal trainer, and I think that that's a box that a lot of people start in. And I don't think I was ever really in that box. The way that I approached that role was always above and beyond, which was more of a coach. But my success really came from those that invited me in to be a coach. And the people that I wasn't able to reach as much, I think I was forcing myself on them in that way. So in other words, I was wanting to be a bigger part of their life than they wanted me to be. And I really have, now 25 years into this, when I look at the success that my clients have had, it's that relationship that we've been able to build upon where they will hear my advice. It's the time that we spend outside of the workouts collaborating on what life looks like that's made all the difference. Because it's not just about sets and reps. It's about all of those other things that you do and why are you doing them. So for example, if I'm trying to help someone get stronger, I'm trying to help somebody walk better, which is really the primary pattern that we should all be after, in my view, is locomotion. That's the thing that I'm going to have to be able to do forever.
Moving forwards.
Yeah. If any of these, my life goals and dreams that I can list on paper, if I break them down, I'm like, well, I got to be able to walk to do any of that stuff, right? If it involves me being there for my family, if it involves me making memories with my family, any of the amazing things that I want to do, require me to have a body that works in order to be able to do them. My life does not exist on the couch. It's just not who I am, right? Perpetual motion is the deal for me. And I feel like I can only sit still in moments like this because I know what it's like to move, right? Otherwise, I'm the guy I would be in school when I was younger, and I would always, right? As soon as I started doing competitive sports and I was at swim practice in the morning and at basketball practice after school and things like that, all of a sudden I started to be able to do this. And I think that that's how most of us are wired. There's a fundamental thing where we all need a certain amount of movement to have well-being and health. But when we talk about the bridge from training to coaching, that's the difference as I see it, is that oftentimes as a coach, you have to be invited in that capacity. And some people, particularly when they're feeling vulnerable, when they don't have a high level of fitness, right? At some point when I meet someone, they have reached out to ask for my help. And how much they're willing to let me help them is up to them. And I don't think I always recognized that early on in my career. And I was like, okay, well, you asked for my help. Let's go. And I'm like, where are you going? Right? What do you mean? Like, it's supposed to be hard. I'm supposed to challenge you. And if I'm coaching you, I'm going to challenge you. That's the whole thing. Is like, hey, great job. Okay. Now that you can do this, can we also do this? And part of the expectation when we're talking about training, because there's also a difference between training and working out. If I'm training, I'm consistently aiming to get better, and I'm competing against one person, and that's me. And that's what I encourage my clients to do too, is like, hey, this comparison culture thing where you're comparing yourself to someone else has to stop, because what ultimately we're after is to either repair or hone or improve the relationship we have with our body, which is us. And so if someone is competing with themselves, they need to set the mark, move the bar, set the mark, move the bar, right? And I can help them do that and challenge them, knowing that fear is part of the process. What we're doing is teaching the body not to flinch.
That's good.
Right? So if I'm gonna approach that from my biblical understanding, like my ring, our wedding vows, perfect love casts out fear. Right? So sometimes that love means that I'm your friend. Sometimes that love means that I'm the enemy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm okay with either one of those things. And I can totally detach from any of those feelings in that moment, because when I'm down in the trenches with the client, I'm pretty open with the fact that there's going to be some days where it feels like we're walking through hell together, but we're not doing it alone, and they're not going to have to do it alone. The nature of training is that we're working on things that we're not as good at, and those enhance the things that we already are good at. It doesn't forsake those things. We don't lose the things that we're really good at when we focus more of our time on the things that we're not as good at. And this elusive idea in our modern culture of balance, whatever that means to you, we want to balance the body best that we can, knowing that there really isn't symmetry in the body. There's just symmetrical balancing of load. Can I produce force? Can I stabilize force, transfer force? But it starts with being able to generate force, but that's not the end all be all. A lot of people would describe strength training as that's what they're looking at, generating force. Well, the thing that becomes different when I look at someone is going, look at that, if we're going to generate force, we're going to have a foot. We're going to have a pelvis. Like, there's some things that I'm going to be looking for, and there's going to be some emotional centers in the body that we go through, and it gets a little weird sometimes, right? People start feeling some things. People may have some feelings that they put in their body that they may have thought that they addressed long ago, right? I may have some sadness or some anger or whatever it is that I feel like I'm pretty okay with. I already sorted that issue, right? I already sorted that drama, but I've tucked it down somewhere, and that could be a long history type thing, something from my childhood, let's say, right? Everybody wants to talk about trauma. That's definitely real. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize, trauma is an ongoing thing. Like, you and me are sitting here and we're both kind of stoic and having a real conversation, right? But if we were playing poker, you're not going to see anything below the table, really, right? And so if everything's fine, right? Hey, how you doing? Fine. I'm fine, right? That's poker, right? I'm not letting you know how I'm feeling. I'm trying to breast my cards. I'm leveraging things. I'm trying to strategize, right? Well, all the while, that's how most people do business. That's how most people do their day. At some point, I need to let go of all that. Otherwise, I'm just doing everything like that. And if I spend the majority of my time approaching my workout like that, like, okay, cool, I've got an hour on my lunch hour, I'm going to go do the big three, right?
What are the big three?
Squat, bench press, deadlift is powerlifting, right? And powerlifting is a great sport in of itself. In my view, powerlifting and then bodybuilding have both been the two loudest voices for a long time in fitness. And the average fitness goer, most people in the general population, don't have all of those things that people from years of powerlifting that are at a high level, or those even in bodybuilding, bring to those exercises, right? I don't think I realized that even when I was a bodybuilder years ago, that those at the top of bodybuilding, when you look at their history, it's like, well, I was a gymnast and I was a professional soccer player, and then I did judo, I was in the Pan American Games, and then I decided that weightlifting was really where I wanted to go, or bodybuilding, or whatever it is. Okay, well, there's a whole lot of training and a whole lot of movement that goes into all of those things, and a whole lot of stability that most of us don't have unless we're doing all of those things. And so then someone like me, I went from being an athlete in high school, and I looked back at when I really first started working out. I was working out with my friends that played football, and I was a swimmer and a tennis player. Right, but I'm doing a football workout because that's what my buddies are showing me. I don't know. My coaches at that point, I'm 45, so back in my day, they were like, "Well, you need to lift weights." That was about as much guidance as I got on what that meant. My swimming started to suck. Initially, I was better. I was faster because I was stronger, but that was short-lived. I can look back and go, okay, that's why I was trying to do my freestyle out here. My shoulder wouldn't go here, right? Things like that. Even my tennis serve began to be one of those things where, right, I didn't have the thoracic extension and the mobility in my shoulders to do a lot of these things. So bodybuilding became a sport that I focused on, and the more and more I focused on it, the more I began to look like the trophy, which was the goal, the more my body began to hurt. So I'm like, why is it that the more I look like this trophy, my shoulders hurt, my neck hurts, my knees hurt. I really don't feel like doing much else if I'm not working out, because I'm saving myself for my next workout. I can barely walk from the last one I did because I'm trying to grow, or whatever the thing was, right? There's a whole lot of sacrifice and commitment that comes into that. And so for me, working 10 and 12 hours a day like I did, and then trying to sneak my workout in for an hour, all my time, effort, and energy in that hour went to adding muscle. And when you look at those that are at the top of that sport, they spend more than just that time. Even if that hour goes to adding muscle, they're doing things like Pilates outside of that time. They're doing things like mobility work outside
Arnold
of that time.
Schwarzenegger, he was doing ballet.
Sure, right? And there's a whole lot of other things that go into maximizing that hour. And so whether it's accessory exercises or whatever it might be, I wouldn't necessarily always call it stretching, although there is some value in stretching. It's more about mobility and being active in shapes and things like that, in my view. But so I started helping clients with orthopedic
This was
issues.
after,
while I'm training, while
you're
competing. I'm bodybuilding. I'm competing in North Carolina. I'm competing in Tennessee. Never quite at the national level. I never made it that far. I was great at getting second place at the state contest, But I'm really grateful for those years of getting second place, because I was always studying what was happening in first place. Right? I was going, what is it? Man, right? And it's through getting second place, getting third place, and looking at who's getting second and first, or whoever's in front of me, going, they may not be able to explain this to me, but what is that thing that they have that I want, that I'm after? They say I just go like this. Like Michael Jordan would say, hey, just stick out your tongue a little bit further and jump off the free throw line and dunk it, right? Everyone else is going, okay, well, thanks, Michael, but when I stick my tongue out, that doesn't just happen, right? So I was always that trainer that was willing to help someone that no one else wanted to train, because I love solving a puzzle.
What does that mean? that
That means, hey, I have lupus. Hey, I have rheumatoid arthritis. Hey, I have HIV. Hey, I've had 2 hip replacements. Right? By the time you work yourself into a given price point, people are older. And what comes with that, there's a correlation there where all of a sudden, well, I've got a hip, or everybody's got something, right? By the time someone's in their 40s or 50s, they tend to have a thing or two, right? They've been through some stuff. And so I would collaborate with physical therapists and work in a cumulative way to make sure that what I was doing was in line with the guidance that they were getting from their physicians and their They're rehab experts. And the gift that I had with this person was that I often would be able to see this person much more than someone gets with a physical therapist, right? Physical therapists would refer their clients to me, their patients to me as clients, and go, hey, this guy can afford you. I'd really like for him to keep going. He wants more than just carrying a sack of groceries into the house, right? She's checking all the boxes. Like, we're done with physical therapy, but he really, if he's going to continue to progress or even get back to the life that he wants, he's going to need more than what we can give him. And that's where I would come in. But what a learning process that is, where I think people would naturally trust me, and they would be drawn to me, and I'd be like, why do they want me? Like, I don't know anything about this, right? Like, I don't know anything about this person's shoulder. I'm the guy that'll figure it out. And so ever since, I'm the guy that's really good at saying, I don't know. Right? Like, I think a lot of our woes come from knowing the answer already, instead of saying, I don't know, but let's figure it out. Right? And more and more and more, the more I've done that, the more when somebody comes to me and goes, oh, I got this shoulder, blah, 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 I'm like, yeah, I recognize that. Yeah, you got one of those, huh? Yeah. And you think that's special, right? Everybody's like, no, you don't understand. This is my knee, or this is my bad this, or my bad, right? And everyone puts themselves in this category of like, they're so different because they've got this special thing. And I'm like, no, you have a meat suit. I've got a meat suit too, right?
You say meat suit?
Meat suit, right? We're in this meat suit of a body, and there's the laws of physics, and then there's everything else, right? So the more that we can align ourselves within the laws of physics, the more, even if I've got whatever I would call a bad shoulder, a bad back, a bad hip, or whatever, right? That stuff goes away, right? Even if the connective tissue or the MRI or the X-ray, whatever, may look like a mess, it doesn't have to hurt, right? How am I using those body parts with my whole body is the thing. And it takes some work to really understand how all this stuff goes. But the way that I coach someone is that I've got their trust, and we can just approach that from an experiential place. Versus when I had on the trainer hat, it was, whoa, what do you know about shoulders? And I'd have to go, well, actually, it's your infraspinatus, sir, because let me test this for you. And and now we're in this whole litany of things where I'm going, okay, see, I just showed you why I'm right, and we should do this. Oh, all right, well, hey, see you next time. All right. Or I'm still aiming to help that person, but I've given them so much information that they've got paralysis by analysis. Now you know everything there is to know about a shoulder, but your shoulder still doesn't move. That didn't do it, did it? So as a coach, I've got the license to say, all right, hey, you're just going to have to trust me. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to trust the process together, right? And over time, you might have a dissertation you can bring me on how your shoulder works, but we didn't start with the dissertation on the shoulder, right? You've got a whole different story and set of stories that you've told yourself about that shoulder while it's no longer your bad shoulder, right? It was how you were using that shoulder, right? And that can be taught, and that can be done experientially. There's some great tools like rope flow, all sorts of different things that can be deduced to a rhythm, right? We use terms like glenohumeral rhythm.
Say that again.
Glenohumeral rhythm.
Glenohumeral rhythm.
Right? So how does your shoulder and your scapula work together, basically? Right? And that's a rhythm, right? When the scapula does this, the shoulder does that. And when the shoulder does this, the scapula does that. And if I'm able to do that, I'm also going to have a pattern with the rest of my body. Am I in my pelvis? Am I breathing? There's going to be a list of truths. I know when we were talking the other day, you and me have done some DNS work together.
DNS, describe that for people watching that don't know. Dynamic
neuromuscular stabilization, right? Working on things from a childhood development, right? Crawling patterns, if you will, right? Everybody on Instagram has seen a crawling pattern or two, right? They're real big, but the reason that they are is because it's intrinsic movement, right? At some point, we all learn to walk and move by crawling first. And so if you can bring someone to a crawling pattern, there's a lot less that needs to be narrated, right? It can be experiential. You can go, hey, go like this. No, not like that. Lift your head up a little bit more. No, not like that. Put some pressure on the inside of your hand. Or just like that, but stick your tailbone up. Whatever, right? You can find one or two little cues. Give somebody a brick and watch them build a city before your eyes in some of these positions because there's so much power in these intrinsic movements.
So what you're saying is that these DNS, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization movements, are learned patterns built into human growth from infancy.
I would say there are learned patterns, but when we define what learning is, there's many levels of learning, right? I would say that those patterns are in our biology. The body knows right? Like look at animals, for example, right? You might have a dog that you take from its mom at an early age, right? You have a male puppy, and all of a sudden you see he lifts its leg to pee on the bush one day. And you're like, man, I haven't even had my dog around other dogs. How do you know that he's going to lift his leg to go pee on that bush? Right? Perfect example, right?
Yeah. So it's built into our genetics.
And we also learn from our environment. So if I'm an infant, I'm also looking at how my dad moves and how my mom moves, and I'm going to learn
subconsciously.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm going to pick up on that.
And so what you're saying with these DNS movements is that they are things that we naturally, habitually learn in the first year or two of our lives as our children are growing, running, playing, climbing outside like kids should. God designed our bodies. And I think that's interesting too, because, right, humans are like the least developed creature on the planet when we come out, right? A whale comes out swimming. A deer comes out running. A baby goat comes out jumping immediately, right? But what's so interesting about humans is that we come out totally dependent, more than any other physical creature that exists, on our parents. And over time, we're protected and guided, and we cannot progress through these other movements before going step by step, right? God is a God of order and structure. And so I'm assuming what you're saying is that these DNS movements are things that babies will intrinsically know. It's built into our biology. They begin to do them. And then as we grow up, we stop doing them. Right? Is that correct?
Yeah. No, I think it's a great take on it. Yeah, absolutely. I would add into that while babies are learning and doing these different developmental patterns, there's not a perfect order, right? There's how we, if you read these childhood development books and you're a parent, right? It says, well, look for your child. It looks like this week they should start to roll over. Or look, right? How do they know that? Well, they've studied this for an extended period of time.
It's just the average.
Right? But it doesn't mean that your kid might not roll over sooner or later, or right? Or, you know what? It was supposed to be these 12 steps, but they did 10 of them and skipped 2 of them.
Yeah, a good example. I played hockey. That's my favorite sport. And Alex Ovechkin right now, he's a Russian player. I don't think he started playing hockey until he was 12. And he is currently today 12 goals away from breaking Gretzky's all-time goal record.
Wow.
And so I think he's 39 now. There's like a whole big race of whether or not he's going to complete it and beat it before the end of the season this year. But my son in hockey, everyone's telling me, oh, if he's not playing travel hockey by 9, 10, competing across the nation already, he has no chance.
Sure. Well, and that's where commerce, right? We can have another conversation about how commerce affects all of these things, right? If I'm a trainer, right, whatever people are expecting of what they consider a trainer is what they think they're paying for. And I can't tell you how many clients I've run off going, oh, sorry, man, I know you thought we were just going to do some curls before you went to the mall, but that's not what you need, dude. Right? Like, or ma'am, right? I've trained just as many, actually probably more females than I ever have males. It was when I started becoming a coach that I became, my clientele became mostly males. I touch people right? I'm saying, hey, man, right? And there becomes this.
Oh, you've touched me.
That's right. That's right. But a lot of times that's helpful. If I put you into a position for an isometric, you remember that. Right? When you're doing that outside of the time that you're with me, even if it's 80% as good as it was in the position that I put you in, when you come back, you're better, right? And so there's a certain amount of feedback that you can give someone, whether it's a tactile cue or it's actually just putting them in a position and saying, now you hold that position, right? There's not a good position or a bad position. There's just positions that we spend the most time in and some that we avoid. And so looking for those places that we avoid is the thing. And so when I said that childhood development, it's normal for some of us to skip steps. I was a fat baby, right? I was like almost 11 pounds, right? I did not crawl.
That explains so much.
At some point, I just got up and walked, right? Well, now here I am as an adult working on these crawling things. And it's like, whoa, life-changing. Oh my gosh, my shoulder can do that. My hip can do that, man. It's all brand new to me. So there's a reference that my body understands how to train my body to my body. Like my foot goes, oh, well, if I'm doing the same thing that the hand is at the same time, or the opposite or ipsilateral hand, if my right hand and my left foot are in sync, and my right foot and my left hand are in sync, well, how many other muscles might I work that I normally might not work that way, right? So there was a lot of steps that I know that I skipped in that developmental series as a result. And I can look at the way that we do anything and say that that's the way we do everything. And if we're talking about human movement or training the subconscious, it becomes pretty clear, right? Like I'm a guy who tends to skip details, right? As I've gotten older, my discipline is higher than it's ever been. And it comes from making myself go back and go through the details. I'm not naturally a guy who's like, let's learn all the details. But you know what? If I know that going over the details is going to help you, I get the details right because I'm not going to let you down, right? If I know that in order for me to unlock the next level that I want to go in my life or in my workout or in my body, whatever I'm looking at, right? I'm going to approach it the same way. I'm going to use the discipline to go into the details. And if we want to get biblical, our steps are ordered. And we tend to all kind of skip steps. And we end up in this place where we think it's all perseverance, right? I'm just going to will myself through everything. And I'm like, whoa, are you bringing God with you? Are you bringing God with you? Because I think if you're bringing God with you, he'd say, hey, make sure you go through all the steps, bro.
Yeah, that's 2 Peter 1, verse 5 through 8. First, faith, then goodness, then knowledge, then self-control with the knowledge, and then comes perseverance, right? And so, yeah, I've witnessed in discipling programs that I've been a part of in the church before with guys, they tend to even, I believe in God, I believe in this thing, I have faith, I'm going to add goodness, which is sort of exploration, right? That's another word for goodness there that Peter was talking about, is exploration. Let me explore what's good, right? And that exploration leads to information, which is knowledge, and then self-control. What a lot of people do with knowledge is then they go back and start over.
Well, how do we get knowledge to become wisdom, right? Because I want wisdom. Knowledge by itself, I've climbed up the tree of knowledge before, and if I'm honest, and I look back and do an honest inventory, when I was climbing the tree of knowledge, I thought it was the tree of life, right? But I was in the tree of knowledge, and I ended up with all this information, and I'm like, well, how am I going to help somebody with this?
Self-control.
I can't do the thing it is I'm describing. I'm telling you all about what a cartwheel, double back flip, and all of these amazing physiological things that happen in the body, and I'm tracing a molecule through the body, and it's so exciting, and I get high in my brain with the idea of it. But no, it's not what I'm doing. It's not what I'm doing, and unless I can simplify that enough to go, hey, bro, just try this, go like that. And you go, whoa, what's the point, right? It's just, unless I'm just going to write a book about it to talk to other people that know as much as I do or more than I do about something, it's not really a place to go for me anymore. I've spent the last several years just letting so much of the knowledge that I've built over a lifetime as a coach acquiesce into wisdom. And so much of what I see as coaching at the highest level is me saying, hey, Walker, just go like this. And you go, oh, and then you might come back and go, oh my gosh, yeah, my shoulder didn't click, whatever you're going to say. And then the more that even when we're doing other exercises, somehow together we learn to recognize that we're training the same qualities. It's the same principles. It's the same thing. Like we were talking earlier about how I'm trained, and I've studied under different paradigms. I've studied under different mentors, and there's different languages as you go around the circle. It took me a while to recognize that it was in fact a circle. I would go, well, no. Okay, this guy was saying this. You're telling, okay, I knew that wasn't it. Yeah, okay.
The Weck method.
Weck method, great. Hey, the guy's a genius. The guy is amazing, right? And he has a really brilliant way of being like head over foot. Okay, well, you can spend forever in a lifetime on that concept. And all of a sudden you get all of these other amazing angles and vectors and all of these other things that everybody else is trying to calculate. There's some principles that you can follow where you start to use one side long, one side short, but it's not one side on, one side off, or let's lock in the middle, right? But going around the circle of different people to study under different things, at some point you go, so you're talking about this, idea.
It goes back to your commerce.
Yeah, and you and me had a conversation the other day when we were talking about DNS and when a light bulb really went off for you in that moment. I don't know if you remember this talk, but you were like, "This is just like DNS, but now we're adding a weight," or "It's just like DNS." But it was absolutely great if you understand it that way. Yeah, and if we go biblical with it, what do we say? If it's true, it's true.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the idea, is that it's the truth as a coach and as a someone who's following a calling to serve others. And I really do believe that I'm called to help other people. Right. If it's the next person in front of me, wherever I am, there's a way that I can help. That's who I want to be and what I aim to do. Then my job is to share the truth. But when I was a trainer, I would go, well, you wanted the truth. And I didn't realize that was a big disservice, because now I just gave you a dissertation on the proof and we didn't do anything. We might have even spent an hour on a foam roller. But did you get better? Or did you just learn a bunch of really big words today that now you can go recite and tell someone else? But meanwhile, you still have plantar fasciitis. Meanwhile, your back still hurts, right? Whatever the case may be. And so it's about being able to apply these things, trust the process, and it's the consistency, right? There is no perfect anything, right? There's one perfect, and then there's all of us. But what can be near perfect, the closest to perfect, is our commitment to consistency, right? If I can commit to showing up, like I took a day off of working out the other day. I took a day off of training and I thought about it, and I couldn't tell you the last time I did that. Right? They call it good, call it bad. I know that Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday are my strength training days, and I'm going to do some kind of movement. Sometimes it's cardio, sometimes it's mobility, whatever it is. But there's something that happens every day. If it's a recovery day, I'm recovering from doing a harder bout of exercise, but it doesn't mean I'm not moving. There's going to be some movement that takes place in there. Well, that consistency has what's allowed me to not have to know this or know that. When everybody wants to know what the perfect thing is, it's because they think that they're going to somehow hack their way into doing some kind of perfect exercise and make up for all the times that they're not doing anything. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Did you know about the blue zones?
Yeah, around the world?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's that Netflix documentary called The Blue Zones, and they went and analyzed all these different places of centenarians, so people that live to 100, places where there's the most centenarians, folks that live to 100 or more. Mm-hmm. And Jenna, my wife, and I watched a few episodes, and of course, they put their spin on it, right? Whoever made this documentary. But I watched it and wanted to see the truth without a spin. And my takeaway from that the biggest ones were, I think, Sardinia and Okinawa that stood out to me. And they followed these centenarians around and they watched their daily lives. And in Sardinia, there's hills and there's the espresso shop and there's the garden and there's the sunlight and the salt water. And they just do things, right? And there's no fiber internet and they're just moving and they're gardening and then they're up and then they're walking up and down a hill at 103 years old, this giant ass hill, to go hang out with their buddies and smoke a cigar and play poker in the sunset light.
Do they dance?
They dance. The Okinawans, they sit down on the floor when they eat. They're standing up, sitting down, standing up, sitting down. They're squatting all day long, 1,000 times a day for 365 days a year. And again, that was my biggest takeaway. You know, a lot of the thing too was they didn't have the tech. There was less tech in their lives, which also is the thing that makes us do this, right? I'm here on the computer. I'm here.
People get tethered to that stuff, man.
They get tethered to it. That's a funny word, tethered to the internet, right? And that was my biggest takeaway from that blue zone thing was they're just moving. They just don't stop moving. They don't stop living life.
Well, there's a thing that happens there, right? First of all, this term exercise that we use, that's such a Western kind of idea, exercise, right? All we're doing is trying to make up for all that stuff that we don't do. Right. We have chairs. I've got I love my Chase Lounge. I'm just going to say that. I love my Chase Lounge at home, right? We've got chairs and cars and all of these things that we end up using for a big part of our lives. And we have a sedentary lifestyle on top of that. And so really exercise becomes that thing where we're just making up for all those things that we just had to do to be alive once upon a time, right? And some of that may be play. Some of that might be like I can't tell you how many times my clients or myself, when I look at some of the darkest chapters of my life, I had forgotten how to play. I was taking myself way too serious. And so much of the freedom that comes from working on self-control, if we're talking about stability in the body, allows you to play in your body. It's not willing yourself through a workout like, I'm going to make myself back to the grind. Like, hey, bro, if something's grinding, you might want to look at that again. We're not trying to grind through something here, right? We want things to be smooth, right? Like what would Bruce Lee say? Slow is smooth. And smooth as fast, right? So that's so much of it is let's slow down. Let's allow ourselves to maybe actually, you know what? Here's a truth bomb. How many people think that they're going to get their workouts in because they're looking at some statistics and go, well, I work out 3 hours a week. That says here that if I have strength, okay, well, great. So you're not digressing to the mean. You're probably already in whatever it is. I don't know. Don't quote me on this, but you're probably in the 80 or 90 percentile just by having some kind of regular workout program, exercise. We can call it work. It doesn't even have to be training. Like you just said, you're out there moving around doing like, right? That's how low the bar has been set because the general population has been in steady decline for so long that you're better than your neighbor just because you're doing something, right? Where I come in is like, okay, now that we're doing something, what are we doing? Like if we're going to take this exercise and use it as medicine and make it an elixir of sorts, what is it that we need? What's your why? Why are we doing this? What do we need the most of? Where do we spend the most time? Right? To give you the most effective dose. No more, no less, but the most effective dose. And the longer that we've been training, and you know this to be true, you've been working out for a while, right? You can't do as much as you want to do. You got to keep yourself from doing all the things that you want because I want to come back and do it tomorrow. I want to work out again, but I can't show up tomorrow. I'm going to have to take my ball and go home. I'm not going to be able to come back and do that workout till next week if I do that, right? So learning how to, eat an elephant one bite at a time is part of what we're trying to do. And so the hard truth bomb for a lot of people to swallow is you might actually need some 2-hour days. Not because you're trying to grind for 2 hours and right? But because it might take you that long to figure out the easiest way how to do something. And that's what we train, right? I'm going, man, you're working too hard. All right, when you find the thing, and sometimes it might be your third set, and you go, oh man, that was easier than the first. Yeah, okay, great job. Right? That's what we're after. Is that the most efficient way to do something is the way that I want to strengthen my body to operate. Right? I've got an operating system here, and it's a choice. Movement is a strategy, and I get to pick my strategy.
So, all right. So I've got a question. If we look at the adults that can, let's say in their 40s, that can move the most, have the least amount of injuries, have these things. And you and I, our sons are outside playing together right now. They're 8 years old in 2nd and 3rd grade. What do they need to do from now until 40 to maintain strength, health, wellness, mobility, all of the above? What's the easiest way for somebody watching this right now? Let's say they're dealing with ailments, issues that they've got to fix, right? How do they help their kids not deal with that?
Well, what are our sons doing right now? They're outside playing basketball. They're probably playing with some sticks.
On the trampoline.
They're engaging with one another, having a conversation without a phone in their hand, right? They're exploring things together. They're teaching each other things. They're sharing ideas, right? All of those things are, I would say, the simplest answer, right? If we go back to what it is that we did in our childhood, and some of our woes come from the fact that some of us skipped some of that stuff. Some of us, like I know for me, when I was a kid, there was part of me that was like, I'm not doing that. That's kid stuff, right? And I was like, well, no, dude, you're a kid. Like, you're supposed to go do that, right? Quit trying to grow up so fast. Like, go be a kid, right?
I was so happy when my kids wanted to get into Legos again, because I was like, oh, cool, I've got an excuse.
Sure.
But you know what? There's a lot of other people that are like, I still love Legos. I
Well,
don't
and
have
think
kids.
about, right, it's one thing to build a Lego set right here at this table, but if you got down on the ground to build a Lego tower, right? And some of these kids are pretty impressive with their Legos. Mine didn't look quite as impressive as some of these kids make. I'd be like, oh, it's a tower. Check out my tower. I made another tower. Imagine that, right? Right? It's not an RC car. It doesn't fly. It doesn't, right? But
It's really tall.
But the idea is, think, what does it take to get down there and put something together on the ground and spend that much time on the ground, right? Those things that we stop doing, right? And then be in a sense of awe and wonder and play, because it's not a workout to a kid who's excited about putting some Legos together. They're in a completely different place in their heart and their mind when
It's
they're
all
playing with
subconscious.
Legos. Absolutely. You take an adult and you go, well, we're going to need to get down on the ground. They're like, oh, do we have to? It's like, well, yeah, man, that's where we're going to, right? Now, we need to get up from there and be able to get back on our feet. Absolutely. But a lot of us need to get down on the ground to get reorganized and reacquainted with the ground. And if anything, stop moving as if we're afraid to fall, right? As soon as I know how to tumble and roll around on the ground and do some of this stuff, I'm automatically walking around with a whole different outlook on anything, because I don't have that subconscious fear of, I better watch my step.
You need to be careful.
Be careful.
No, you need to be careful.
Don't take any risks.
The orthopedic
That's not
industry is going to
safe.
come after you.
That's not safe, right? And so whether I'm talking to my Cub Scouts, and my son is in Cub Scouts and I'm one of the den leaders, go pack 50. What I say is, hey guys, we're going to find a safe way to do dangerous things. And they're like, we're going to do dangerous things, right? But there's a framework and a system to operate where you give them the freedom inside of a box, right? And so you're squaring the circle around them over and over again, going, okay, here's the boundaries. Go play in that zone, right? Awesome. Here are the always, 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 and the nevers, nevers, nevers.
See that tree line over there? You can go all the way to the tree line. Don't go past it.
That's right. And we have a system in place to make sure that they're as safe as they possibly can be. Is there a 100% guarantee that no one's ever going to get hurt? Well, no, we have a first aid kit, right? Is there what happens when this happens? Well, we have a system for taking care of those things if they do come up, but we have a safe way to approach these things. And so
That's so funny. We were in Florida last year on vacation at the beach, and there's this restaurant right there on the water on the bay side. So the water was calm. There's no waves, and there's a pier, and the tables are right on the sand. Really cool spot. The kids get to go swim and play in the sand while they're waiting for the food. The sun's going down. Beautiful spot. And I told my son, you can go anywhere you want, as far out in the water as I can see you, 30, 40, 50 feet out. It's still only like 2 or 3 feet deep, and he can swim pretty good. I said, just don't go past that pier. Okay, so my wife and I are sitting there. Food comes. We're taking a couple bites. I look up. Here he comes running over. I cut my foot.
On the pier?
Sure enough, there's a deep, clean gas. Thank goodness it was super clean. Guess where he went? He went past the pier. He cut his foot on a clamshell.
I was going to say on an oyster bed or something.
Yeah, it was a little clam bed over there. There was a bunch of clams. And sure enough, I said, I'll do all of this. Right? But that's like also the same thing as like the Garden of Eden too. God's like, you do whatever you want. There's that one thing over there.
Sure.
Just don't.
Well, and as a coach and sometimes as a father in those moments, right, I recognize that I might need to give a little, and here's why, right? Don't go past, not just because I said, but here's why I said that, right? You'll learn to trust me over time. I don't want you to have to learn by the hard way, right? Like sometimes there is a teaching moment where it's like, well, that's why Dad told you not to go past the pier, right?
I saw this meme the other day, and it said, dads spend 30% of their time parenting their children just doing this.
Yeah. Yep.
There's
a look. There's a look. There's a dad look. Yeah. My son knows it. And and when he can feel it because I know he won't look at me. He can feel the look without actually looking at me like, oh, I better not look at Dad. He's giving me the look, right? Like, I'm like, son, you better look at me. And he'll be like, I'm like, son.
In the eyes.
And that's what we do. And so sometimes he'll reluctantly kind of look up and he'll go, and I'll say, son, look at me. And he'll go, right. But when I'm working with a client, when I'm coaching someone, it's so much, it is the spirit of the Father, right? I'm saying, hey man, I'm going to tell you what you need to do. And here's why. Let me teach you, right? I learn a great deal. Like how many times do we learn from our kids? All the time, right? I learn from my clients. I have brilliant clients from all different walks of life and industries and different backgrounds that I've been privy to work with, and I end up learning quite a bit along the way by teaching. But I'll say, all right, here's the deal. I'm going to read you the last chapter of the book, right? This is the last chapter, right? And this is where the first chapter starts to make sense when you read the last chapter. And then we're going to go backfill, right? Are you on board? This is the story. This is where we're going. This is the adventure, right? So here's why we're going to follow these, right? And then once we get through that book, I go, okay, those were the rules in that book, but we're not at that level anymore. So we're setting up some rules as a framework with the anticipation that at some point I'm going to go, now we're going to get to break those rules.
So this takes us back to 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 8, where the first step in that ordered process is faith, right? And belief. Mm-hmm. And in order to trust God, you have to know faith is defined by the belief in the promises of God. Abraham was counted righteous and faithful because he believed in God's promises. Mm-hmm. All right, that's quoted, I think, 3 different times throughout the Bible. And same thing, we have to know where we're going and believe that it's possible to get there before we make that next step.
Sure. Yeah, no, I absolutely. And so when I work with somebody, I'm okay if in the beginning they just put their faith in me, right? There needs to be a place where they willingly receive the ownership in the process. And that's different for a lot of other people. But what I've recognized over time is that some people really need someone to believe in them. It's not the only thing that they need, right? But they don't believe in themselves like I believe in them when we first meet. And then I'm able to share that belief with them. And then the next phase that before they can make that leap to believe in themselves, they start believing in me. And then there's this really cool thing where they recognize, oh, all of a sudden I see myself in him, like I see myself in them, right? At some point they see themselves in me, and then now they start believing in themselves, right? But that's where I think that faith piece, right, it's the God in me that they're recognizing, just like I recognize the God in them. We may not be able to have that conversation in the beginning. And that's the first conversation I want to have. Certainly the first conversation I get to have is to start talking about God with other Christians. I realize there's other times, and I kind of intuitively feel this out, where I'm going to let them bring it up. I feel like my mission is not always to proselytize. That's not my calling always in the moment. But I can lead by an example that they emulate and bring people closer to God in some way, or God will reach them. I'm not bringing them, right?
They'll see it in you eventually.
Sure. And I'm consistent with the way I do anything is the way I do everything. And I'm never going to ask one of my clients to do something that I don't do. So like you'd ask me about some plyometrics and stuff, and I kind of gave you some general guidelines and some things, right? But I didn't say, hey, you know what? Let's do this Olympic plyometric program. I say, hey, look, I'm just gradually reintroducing plyometrics myself. Here's the framework. Here's what the qualities we want to see that qualify us exploring those plyometric exercises. We want to make sure that we have leg stiffness, or that we're good in these fundamental isometric patterns before we start jumping. Otherwise, where we land is a different place, and it's the landing that we're training, right? But when it comes to helping other people understand how to believe in themselves, part of that comes from them getting the confidence from the competence. And the more competent they get, unlocking different levels, the more they buy into the process of like, oh, I wonder what coach has before me now, right? Or I wonder what I might do next. They start to think in those ways instead of being overwhelmed by, oh my gosh, this is so hard, right? But another thing I share with my clients is we can talk about how hard it is after you do the thing. Like, now that was hard, right? I see you already do that. Like, you're not going to let me know how hard you're working with the look on your face while you're doing the thing. You're squared away. You're breathing, right? And you're loving every minute of it, no matter how hard it is. Which is why you're one of my favorite guys to train because of that. That's a special thing, right? I think I'm that way. Other people they don't have that relationship with the hard work of the thing, right? Now, we don't want to just be all effort all the time, but sometimes it's a mental effort, right? If I'm trying to get your brain to learn a new pattern, the effort is in between the ears, right? Oh my God, I'm trying to hit the nail on the head. But then all of a sudden the physicality to the thing changes as soon as I can get that here. Like when we were just talking a minute ago about the third set was easier than the first two, and that was heavier, or I did more reps, or however, it was somehow, if I was going to measure what was happening in that physically, that looks like that's more taxing. There's more work that got done in that set, but yet my reality was that was easier because of the way I went about doing it, right? So being someone who's a lifelong learner, I teach from that perspective. I want someone else who's still willing to learn. If they're coming to me to get confirmation that it's exactly what they thought it was, then I'm not the coach. And I run people off because that's what preserves the integrity of the work that I do with my other clients, is that this is how it is. This is what we do here. And you've seen my whiteboard, right? We have a list of principles that we follow. And it's there as a checklist. Like, let's all be accountable to these things here, right? These are the steps, and these are the things that we're going through. And having the humility to run yourself through a systems check before you just pull the throttle back or stomp your foot on the gas is something that's applied to my entire life, right? Let me do an inventory, right? If I can do that with my body, can I do that with how good of a husband am I, right? How good of a father am I? How good, and then I can break those into subcategories, right? Am I doing each one of these things? Like if I'm called to be a provider, how much effort am I putting into that, right? And it gives me a system where I think where I've helped a lot of my clients is they may do that really well. And I'm saying, hey, it's the same thing, man. Like we're going to do that with the body, but it's the same thing that you would, I'm going to not knock on this anymore, but it's the same thing. I was getting a look. You're like, don't knock on the table.
No, you're fine. I'm thinking.
But it's the same. Our steps are ordered. And if we can get in a pattern of doing that, how many other things might I be willing to go about today that I might not feel like doing? But you know what? When I got up this morning and got in the ice bath, and then I pushed the sled for 30 minutes, and then I did some exercise, and then I went for a run, whatever it is that I did. I didn't wake up wanting to do that. What wakes me up and gets me excited is I want to feel like I do after I've done that, right? I'm already fast forwarding. I've got to go, okay, it's not my immediate well-being that I'm after. I know that if I get up early, that's my time to do those things that I will otherwise miss, because real life happens for me after those first early hours in the morning. And I'm called to do all of these other things that I end up resenting everyone else for having to do if I don't get my stuff done. I have to prepare myself to be the man that I'm called to be for my family, for my career, for my clients, whatever it may be, by doing that early in the morning. And I'm also leading by example. I'm saying, hey, man, yeah, I didn't want to get up at 5 o'clock this morning, but you know that thing I'm asking you to do? I did that 5 times actually already. You ready to get started? Right? And you can test that, right? Like I had one of my clients the other day was driving down Highway 100 and he saw me running out of the park and he called me. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I'm running. He's like, yeah, I just passed you. It's like, okay, well, it's Sunday. He's like, don't you ever take a day off? I was like, well, no, no, I don't. Right. But it was almost like he was like, wow, okay. Like I wasn't expecting to run into him, but he does do that thing that he tells me I need to do every day. Right. 2 miles, walking 2 miles. Sometimes it's 1 mile for some of my clients, right? But 1 to 2 miles walking outside every single day is a requirement if we're going to pay rent on our biology, in my view. And so you can do the perfect workout or whatever you would think the perfect workout is. And if you're not walking, then you're not ever integrating those things, because those things have to show up in real time. Like when you think about every exercise that you could possibly do in a gym, when you think about all of them, right? Every dumbbell, every barbell, all the machines, whatever it is. When we really break that down, as soon as I take a step and start walking, I'm doing all of those things at once. And so this thing that gets siloed with our exercises and our exercise selection needs to all be one thing, so that I am using one muscle, which is me, and everything that I do, right? And so many of these involuntary muscle contractions that we get, be it in our digestive tract or our circulation or whatever you want to call it, right? What starts that off? How does that potential energy become kinetic energy? Well, locomotion. Me going like this, right? And if I run a lot, that's great. I also need to walk. If I'm just running, I'm going to have some other issues too. I need to walk. We all need to walk. The ones that I know that are the best at running, ultra marathon guys that I've trained and all of those guys, right? Some of them hate to walk.
I hate to walk.
Sure. But all of them will tell you that it's the walking and the really easy runs that allow them to do the hard ones. And everyone has a different process. Like, how do you do an ultra marathon and your heart rate was only 125? Like, how do you do that? Like, well, how much time did you spend building what you can do at a heart rate of 125. Right? We think, oh, I'm 150, 160, you're up. Perseverance. I'm all effort all the time. And most of us are putting way too much effort, and we're redlining our capability all the time. And what builds the engine is to rev it up, bring it back down. Rev it up. Hey, can we just idle? What's your neutral? We were talking about Jason earlier with surplus strength, right? And he's got such an engineering mindset. I remember working with him, and all of a sudden he looked at me one day and was like, I get it, man. This is like a variable transmission. I was like, well, yeah, right. And so during our time working together, we would often talk about. I learned a lot about transmissions working with Jason in that moment. But for him, that was his reference, right? Like one of his expressions that I would hear him say early on in the surplus strength building phases. They've just blown up quite a bit in the last few years. But when he was first starting out, he'd be like, "I'll call you back, man. I'm in the machine. I'm in the machine." Right? The machine. Yeah, sure. Right. But that's it. You've asked me before about scaling. Like you and me have a conversation. We talk about the Bible a lot. We talk about a lot of different things because you've got a pretty multifarious background yourself. But when I'm working with someone, I try to bring it to their specialty. And over time, I learn their specialty that way. I can learn about a lot of different things if I can start to use that as an allegory for what we're doing. All of a sudden, I understand those things. I understand a variable transmission a whole lot more because of my understanding of this and how it compares to that. And you go, oh, yeah. And
because
really,
truth is truth.
Truth is truth. And everything that we see in the world, there's an example of that in this human body. We can look at our human body and you can find it and go, oh, wow, that's just, well, where did that idea come from? Right? It's all in this amazing, brilliant design that we have. So there is a time when you want to be in one gear or another gear. And some of us, depending on the life that we've chosen and the life that we lead, need different gears than other people. Like, that's okay. Like, not everyone may need to be as strong as I am because I'm compelled to not only do the exercise, but I have to demonstrate it for you, and I have to demonstrate it for the next guy, and I have to demonstrate it for somebody else. And I'm going to keep climbing, but I'm going to keep pulling people up along the way, right? Physically and otherwise. But for me, it's more of a physical way of doing that, the way that I train people, because a lot of times what they need is for me to hold them in a position and then go, okay, cool, do that. But I can only onboard so many clients in the beginning, and once I've been working with them for a period of time, I don't have to do that anymore. When I track my Whoop data, I'm like, yep, uploaded a couple of new clients. Once I get them going, 2 months in, Whoop data starts to less strain for the same hour on my end.
Oh, when you're training them.
On my end.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
I can say, just get your chest up, Walker.
Right.
Right? Just get more on hey, lift your left pinky up so that you put more pressure on your right big toe. While you do that, now get a little bit lower. Make sure you breathe. Okay, well, what did I have to do? I just had to talk. But if I start with that, we don't get there because that's like too many things at once, right? We can't talk through it because now I'm thinking about too many things at once. I need to go, hey, get here. Now get here and loosen up a little bit. Get here and be relaxed while you're there. Yeah. All right. Anyway.
Well, all right. I've got a few questions now. All right. That you've given me a lot to work with.
Okay. Oh, good.
So
I was just waiting for you to tell me when to shut up. That's all.
No. I'm going to give you, you're going to talk more. I want to try and narrow some of this down for takeaways. Okay. Like we talked about, bringing it down to a simple perspective for people to take away from
Help me do that. Let's go.
So for your average American in church, right? My podcast, specifically this show, is for the church. One of the big things that I believe and that has led me down this route is the idea that elements of Gnostic faith have subconsciously permeated into American Protestantism, which means that there is somewhat of a belief that the body is a flesh prison. and that our soul and our spirit are somehow redeemed, but our flesh is not, right? But we know that it's all one system. We are made in the image of God. I say this pretty much every show now. We're made in the image of God. He's 3 parts. We're 3 parts. When we become Christians, not only is our spirit renewed, our soul is redeemed, but our flesh becomes redeemed too. Even though it's not everlasting, we are given new bodies in the creation of the next earth, new heaven, new earth, right? And so I want to displace some of these ideas that the body is a flesh prison, right? Don't have sex before marriage. Don't do this. Don't eat this. Your body doesn't matter. Just control your flesh. It's not a part of you. Whoa, no. It is a part of me to be controlled with my spirit, with my soul.
Well, what's the thing with Gnostics where they were always like chasing gnosis, right? Wasn't the gnosis like this
knowledge?
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were chasing knowledge in order to subdue the flesh.
Okay.
Right. And so it was this constant battle. It's like a war with earth and the fleshly realm in order to pursue the spiritual realm. But the special thing about us versus all of other God's creatures that he's made, animals don't have a soul and a spirit, right? The Ben Elohim, the angels, the angelic creatures, they don't have a fleshly body, right? And so we are unique in the way God created us, and that we have
so is your personal belief that animals don't have a soul and a spirit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe that they have.
I do.
You really?
I do.
Okay, we can go over that later.
I don't necessarily think it's the one and the same. I don't think that I'm going to die and be reincarnated as a dog.
Right.
But I definitely think that they have animals have spirits.
I'm willing to touch that.
But that's
later.
okay. That's okay. That's all right. And you know what? What's so cool about this conversation is that we're in agreement on like a million things.
Yeah.
Every now and then there might be one. That's okay. We could be really good friends and have great conversations and not just agree all the time. Which some of my best friends, right? We challenge each other to think about different ideas.
All dogs go to heaven. It's not a movie. It's a documentary, right?
Yes.
Anyways, my goal here is for this to be edifying, encouraging, and educational for Christians trying to figure this whole thing out, because that ideology has gotten the church into a bit of a mess, because Americans are the most obese people in the world, and then Christians are the most obese Americans, and then it turns out Baptists are the most obese Christians.
Wow.
And then Southern Baptists are the most obese Baptists.
Wow, I did not know that.
It goes one step further, but they'll call me racist if I say it.
I know that a lot of times when I have these conversations with Christians, and I'm blessed in that my brother-in-law is a pastor, my father-in-law is a pastor, and I come by way of the wilderness. It's kind of how I've discovered Christianity.
Raised by wolves.
Well, yeah, I can't. It wasn't. I was raised having Hanukkah and Christmas, and I got to choose. And of course, why would I want to choose? I like having both. Like
Wait, I get presents for, is it 10 days?
8 days of Hanukkah.
8 days of Hanukkah and on Christmas?
Why would I ever choose?
What's the African one too?
Well,
what do they celebrate?
That's Kwanzaa.
Kwanzaa. Yeah. Why can't let's add Kwanzaa in too.
So but I just remember, and then I got to where I was supposed to do a bar mitzvah, and I had to learn all this Hebrew, and I was like, okay, all right, maybe it's Christmas. Maybe it's Christmas, right? But really, it was 2010 was when I was baptized, and I did a Bible study.
Me too.
Okay. I did a Bible study with an older gentleman, and it happened to be at a Church of Christ, but that's just where he went to church and he made his Bible study open. I was actually training a quadriplegic guy. Changed my life. Long story short, I would help him I would stretch his arms and kind of help him in some ways.
Quadriplegic means
he was in a wheelchair, didn't have complete use of his arms or legs. He had a little remote control that he would use for his scooter, right?
He used his thumb or something?
He had a tumor in his spine, just an anomaly of health conditions, right? But I had stretched his arms hundreds of times, not a problem. But one of the times I was at the YMCA and I was just lifting his arm, and I just lent his arm, and his arm went, and it broke in my hands.
You broke a dude's arm? You broke a quadriplegic guy's arm?
That's what everybody around me said. Was, oh my God, you broke his arm, right? I held his arm together until the paramedics came. Of course, the first paramedic got there, and like here I've been holding his arm for 30 minutes for them to get there, and he gets there and tries to lift him up out of his chair by his broken arm. And I was like, hey man, like, so, but
could he
what the doctor said, they had to put a rod in his arm. And what the doctor said was that from the times that he had fallen and the times that he had actually bumped into things with his chair, that he already had some micro fractures in those bones because he couldn't load his bones, like, right? The piezoelectric effect that happens when we lift weights and things, obviously he's not going to get that, right? So his bones were brittle. The value that he got from me just giving him a little bit more was the limited amount of movement that he could do would then allow him to say, you know what, I can stand up by myself while my caregiver changes me. And for him, that was asserting independence more, right? That was a huge thing for him, right? And he would feel better, right? So it was a really cool, I learned a great deal from working with him about the body because we certainly weren't doing what I would call strength training, but yet it was helping him.
Yeah.
The other thing that changed my life about working with him was that he always had a Bible study he was invited me to. And I'd go, oh man, I've got clients and I can't go.
And this was before you were saved?
Yes. And so then he came. So not only did he come back after I broke his arm and tell everybody, no, that wasn't his fault. I'm actually getting better from doing this, right? Which was incredible because he pretty much, like in Bellevue where I live, at that Church of Christ, I would run into all of those people at the YMCA. And for a while, it was like, yeah, that's the one that broke Jason's arm, right? So for him to go out of his way to let everybody, no, that's not how that happened. This was bound to happen. My doctors all assured me that it wasn't his fault. He's actually a really great trainer, and that's why I come back to see him. I ended up with some good relationships that were from that network that didn't want to be my friend at all because they were mad at me for breaking Jason's arm, right? Well, so then he comes back and I'm working with him, and he keeps inviting me to his Bible study, and I'm like, hey man, yeah, I'm always working then. So then he comes back in one day and goes, hey, guess what? And I said, what? He goes, I know you always wanted to come to my Bible study, and I was like, well, yeah. And he's like, and it's just too much because I'm working all the time. He said, so I found an older gentleman, and he said that he would work around your schedule, whatever it might be. That if you want to read the word, that he'll do a Bible study with you, and he'll fit into your schedule wherever you've got an opening. And I went, wow, man, I can't say no to that. I was like, okay.
After you broke his arm.
Yes.
You couldn't say no.
Right. Yes.
So Jesus broke that guy's arm.
So I did this Bible study for 3 years. And we read the Bible cover to cover 5 times.
Wow.
And I'm reading this going, man, everybody, because the message that I would get oftentimes from Baptists or others is, well, have you been saved? Well, you're going to hell, right? It's like, well, that's all you got for me? That's the message I would get, right? And then many times I would go, well, man, like I'm seeing the way that you're living your life, brother, and that's not what I want. Right? It's like this attraction versus promotion idea, right? And the more I'm reading this book, I'm like, man, this is, I like this. Corinthians, oh man, it grabbed me, right? Matthew grabbed me. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What, right? That whole Genesis thing. I mean,
talk about physics, but language, all of that put together.
What it was that every word was 1,000 words, right? It was like it's a long book, but yet it's still every word has such brevity to it, right? And it just I fell in love with it, but I'm going, okay, and I'm thinking about the person that gave me the Bible that I'm reading, which was someone else's a gift. It's like, hey, brother, you need this, And I'm going, man, like every time I would try to have a conversation about what it is with someone that had told me, hey, man, have you been saved? Oh, if not, you're going to hell. They didn't have anything to offer. I'd say, man, the Sermon on the Mount, whatever I'm wanting to talk about. They had nothing. They had nothing to offer. And I'm going, was this just a formality? Was this just a let me check the box thing? Right? We do that with exercise. Well, I did the workout. I did the thing, right? I'm checking boxes. And really, when we talk about essence, the essence, right? Are you reading the word and getting into the Holy Spirit of what that is? And I'm not saying that every time I read my Bible, that's where I'm at. I have days that I feel that more than others. But it really is amazing how you can just kind of fan through the pages and then go, I think I'll stop here. And you go, oh, that's what I needed. Right? It's there. And God works that way.
Yeah.
But I started doing that Bible study, and then I went, oh, okay. Me going into the water, that is a spiritual process. That is not a ritual just for ritual's sake. There's a cleansing that is happening in there. And that's me. That's not just water that I'm getting into in that moment, right? And it's like reading about the eunuch that was like, take me to the water, right? I was like, clearly that's a thing. There's something there, right? And I felt that transformation when I was baptized, but then it was like, it was also a process for a year or 2 years or 3 years when I could feel the difference, where I was like, wow, these like somehow the priorities are different for me in my life, right? But when I talk about other Christians that might be on board with all of those things, right? Oh yeah, you're a new creature, all this stuff. Sometimes they take it to a place where they go, well, we get a new one of these when we die, right? Like we get this whole like, light body, however they want to describe the thing it is that we get when we're not on this earth anymore. And so sometimes I think that as Christians, that is used to go, well, we don't really need to take care of this thing. Right? It doesn't matter what we eat. Doesn't matter if we really exercise. We're not worshiping the flesh. And it's like, I'm not worshiping the flesh. I know that I got to be healthy if I'm going to help anybody else. If I'm going to live to my fullest potential, if God has a promise and a purpose for my life, and I know that He does, then I need to act like I'm up for the occasion.
Yeah. I tell my kids and I talk about this too. The way your body looks.
A purpose and a plan, like he says, right?
What do you mean?
What's the scripture? I'm trying to think of the scripture offhand, but it's like that God already His plan is perfect, and He already has a plan and a purpose for our lives.
So I tell my kids, people know almost everything about you with one look. It's easy to tell. The clothes you wear, the way your shoulders sit, your eyebrows sit, the way your cheeks and your mouth sit, the way you make eye contact, all of these things, the shape of your body, the way the clothes fall on your body. We are biological creatures. And to be totally honest, I can tell if somebody's trustworthy or not right away. Mm-hmm. And that's what I tell my kids. Yeah, well, it's natural. Talk about just these inherent traits, right? We go back to the DNS stuff. Just natural. That's just biologically written into us. Why do guys like girls with hourglass figures? It's built into our biology for the continuation of the human species, right? You got wide hips. You can birth my strong baby.
Yeah.
You got some other stuff.
That's biologically appealing to me.
Right. You have large milk ducts. Right? You can feed and provide for my offspring.
Sure.
Right? There's a reason God wired these things into us, and why we're attracted to these things is metaphysically, spiritually all connected, right? And so, it's easy to tell if someone can't take care of the one thing that's carrying them through, how are they going to take care of anything else? Right? Sure. And you can't do that. You couldn't take care of your body. What else can you not take care of?
If I don't care about me, how am I going to have the empathy to care about you? Right? I'm not saying I'm more important than you. That's not what I'm saying, right? If someone ever hears something that I'm saying is arrogance, my empathy tells me that they don't feel good about themselves, right? My confidence should not feel threatening to anybody else. If anything, I hope to inspire other people with how confident I am, that they can be as confident in themselves as I am in myself. But that comes from the fact that yes, Pate is awesome. I love Pate. But Pate can't go it alone. Pate's got some help, right? That's not a saying is, oh my gosh, Pate's just completely powerless and poor, woe is me, and what a terrible guy he is. It's a good thing that he's got the Holy Spirit to keep him under wraps, because otherwise he's a threat to himself and others, right? That's a different animal, right? The person that I am, I think I've always been a good person. The self-control, it's the timing of things, right? There's a time for us to be calm, cool, and collected. And there's a time for us to be silly or even play and experiment with things. But kindness has always been a thing, right? The 10 Commandments have always been a thing. It's not like I only follow the 10 Commandments because I have the Holy Spirit, but there's a lot more fruit in my life. I can do things that other people say are impossible every single day with God. Pate couldn't do impossible things, right? Pate did a lot of cool stuff. Pate had a lot of fun. But the things that I look at my life's biggest accomplishments, my marriage to my wife, my kids, right? Even who I am as a coach and what I'm able to do and deliver truth to my clients is all by way of God, right? I'm sharing what God has shared with me. Like, I've put a lot of time, effort, commitment into learning these things that I did for a really long time. And when I was climbing the tree of knowledge, it was like, oh, blah, blah, blah. As soon as I was like, you know what? I don't need to know all this stuff. Why am I in the tree of knowledge? I'm not doing the thing. As soon as I got more into the tree of life, God bestowed all of this stuff that I would have listed as knowledge. It's wisdom. When I was in the tree of knowledge, I kept thinking, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to figure that out. And as soon as I let go of that, going, you know what? I don't have to figure it all out. I don't have to be perfect. I need to move out of the way and let God be perfect. And then the anointing happens, right? There's an anointing of these things. And God goes, okay, you need to steward these truths, right? I'm giving you this information because it's something you can use to help other people like you're called to do.
Psalm 25:14, the Lord confides in those who fear him. He makes his covenant known to them, right? So that's the same thing as what you're saying. Essentially, you search for it, you might find some of it, but guess what? If you fear the Lord, which is not being terrified of him, but it's a reverence and a respect, he will give you the knowledge that you need. So let's take some of that knowledge.
Yeah, make sure you knock.
Yes. Someone that is your average American Christian today. What are 5 things, and I know it's hard to reduce this, what are 5 things they can add to their life or adjust to get them to using this system the right way?
Number 1, walk at least 1 mile, hopefully building up to 2 miles every day outside. Right? There's something that happens when we balance ourselves with nature. Right? We are not living in this modern world in balance with our biology. And so the vestibular system, that's balance, right? Walking is the fundamental thing. There's all of these health woes. It's like the magical 10,000 steps everybody talks about. Really, 8,000 is good. I have some clients, my goal for them is 8,000. 10,000 is amazing. There's going to be, right? 10,000 became more of one of those things that kind of got some branding wrapped around it. 10,000 is better. I would say that 8,000 is more of the gold standard of what we hope to be able to get where a lot of those things happen. So that would be
number 8. Again, we keep talking about.
There you go. Right. My name's Pate, P8. So if we go to number 2, which is in addition to number 1, it's not on Monday I do number 1 and on Tuesday I do number 2. These are everyday things, right? That's what you asked me for, right? 5 things every day. Number 2, how much water do you drink? And it may be that we replace some of those other beverages with water. I had a client years ago, and I remember her saying, well, I drink, whatever it was, 40 ounces of coffee every day, but, that's mainly water. And I'm, okay, well, hold on. There's some things where we want to add to our water requirement if we're probably need to back down the coffee a little bit and increase the water. But coffee being a diuretic, you're going to have to add more water. So water is important. Salt. There's a lot of us that are still afraid to have salt because of blood pressure and this and that and the other. If we get rid of the sugar, having salt, not such a big problem, right? We, in fact, so much of the way that our body works is much like a saltwater battery, which would be salt and water, right? So we need both. We need electrolytes, right? Another thing would be sunlight. I notice you've got your red light panel. I've had that luminous red panel myself. I've got some other ones too, but that's a good one. Even when we do red light therapy, oftentimes what we're doing is making up for what we might have once upon a time received from the sun, right? If we haven't had enough sun exposure for an extended period of time, we aren't going to be resilient to the sun. So the amount of sunlight that we actually need might exceed what we can take in and still not have skin cancer, for example, right? So red light therapy is a way we can supplement that. And it's something that I use in my practice and in my life. I know it doesn't necessarily work with the logistics of scheduling for everybody to wake up and see the sunrise and get early morning sun and afternoon sun. We can supplement that, but we need to get some kind of sunlight. I had a client of mine who had a home office, and I went to go check out her workspace because that's one of the things I do with my clients is like, let me see your workstation. Let me see how your chair's set up. How do you have your car seat set up, right? Those things are important. She had no window. I said, oh, hold on. Before I even look at the chair, there's no windows in here. I was like, you're doing 10-hour days working from home and you're in a closet. Let's start there. It cost her $4,500 to add a window to her home office, and she still thanks me for that, right? There was nothing else I was going to be able to offer her in way of getting healthy if she wasn't going to put the window in. I said, hey, you're better off doing less training with me and getting yourself a window, right? Sometimes for me to share the truth with somebody isn't the best commerce for me, right? Like, hey, I would love for you to spend $4,500 more on me with training, but it's that important. I would rather you not train with me for a while and get yourself a window, right? Or we can't out-train some of these things, right? Screen time can be another one. So like blue light glasses are a thing.
So is that number 4?
I would say number 4 would be.
Wait,
you're
no, that's number 4.
Well, we just said number 1,
walk.
Number 2, water. Number 2, sunlight. Or number 3,
salt.
Salt.
Sunlight.
Number 4 is sunlight. Okay. Mm-hmm. Number 5 is more of a right. Those were all kind of do's. There's only a few don'ts, right? And so I guess you could make it. You could phrase it as a do. Do wear blue light glasses, right? Our hamstrings are our eyes.
Explain that.
Our eyes are our hamstrings, and our hamstrings are our eyes. If I trace what happens from all the nerves and how everything moves through my body, all the way up my spinal cord, right? My right eye is going to be my left hamstring, and my left eye is going to be my right hamstring in a lot of different ways, right? There's a pattern. Like when you're playing in sports and you go, hey, the body's going to go where the head, if you look that way, you're going to go that way. If you look this way, you're going to go that way. Okay, well, how many times you, me, the world, we spend doing this, doing that, right? And I might look at a bird fly across my screen, for example, here. How different is that from me tracking a bird in the sky, right? One of those is a whole full body thing that I just did. The other one is just me in an arbitrary position moving my eyes. So my eyes have muscles. I get my eyes weak and patterned to this. Guess what? Now I do my workout on a treadmill and maybe I'm watching a movie. Maybe I'm looking at my phone, checking emails. And while I might be getting some of the physiological benefits of walking, I'm not getting the other health benefits, which include untethering myself from my devices, right? There's a biological component to this that I need to be able to walk with my head up. I need to look at the horizon. I need to be able to balance. There's one of the great things about being a coach, and I think probably anything when you get to the highest levels of it, like you've been in video production for a long time, it's as much art as it is science, right? It's both. I remember when I was in college, I would go, why do they call this the art and sciences building? Like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything artistic in the science courses I'm taking, and I don't feel like I'm doing anything scientific in the artistic classes I'm taking, yet I'm in the arts and sciences building. Why do they put these together? But I think it's the more you climb in each one of those endeavors, the more they merge, and they are the same. So if I am... there is some science to that where I am patterning my eyes in a way where my eyes are going to lead me into different muscles in my body, and I'm going to overuse some things and underuse others if I don't have the ability from walking every day, looking around. I'm not looking at my phone. I mean, I see people in my neighborhood all the time when they're walking and they've got this. I'm like, well, we don't want that either. Right? Put the thing down. If you like, and some of this is like for any one of these steps, some of this what it really involves is like, do you give yourself some time where you're okay with not being able to be reached? Are you preoccupied with the next meeting that you're going to have, or the last phone call that you had, or always trying somebody else somewhere else, or are you plugged in and checking in with you? Right? So much of what I do when I coach somebody is about going through a systems check and going, okay, here's where I am today. And here's the exercise I might be about to do. I need to qualify it. Like, what are the things that I'm going to do before I do a strength workout, right? Does my shoulder do this? Does my hip do that? Can I breathe while I do? Well, while I'm walking, just like I explained earlier, walking is literally every single exercise you're ever going to do at once. The way that that's so is that I get back in touch with some of my biology by looking at the horizon, by looking at the sky, by not having to look at my feet when I take a step. There's a big one, right? And if I'm wired to this, right, my foot doesn't know where it is when I'm up here, and I need to know where my foot is, and it's just a feeling of where I am in space. The proprioception comes from that, right? And so those would be the big takeaways, right? Number one, what did I say number one was? Walk, right? These are in no particular order. They all need to coexist. And a lot of times people get started with the nutritional part of it, the water and the salt and the eating good foods and the sunlight thing, and then the walking takes care of itself. Right? But those all need to be in there. It doesn't matter where you start as long as you start knowing that you're trying to put all of those things together. And it's amazing how much less knowledge somebody feels like they need when they're doing all those things. I think you do a pretty good job of doing most of that stuff on a regular basis, right?
I try.
And when I give you an exercise or I give you something new, I watch you quickly take that, make it your own, and you come back better, often over and over again. And that would not be so that would not be so if you hadn't walked since the last time you worked out and you really hadn't really been outside at all. Well, one of these days I'm going to drink some water. None of that stuff would happen, right? And so I've had clients over the time where they want to give themselves credit because on Monday they had a salad, and on Tuesday they drank some water, and on Wednesday they went for a walk, and on Thursday they worked in the yard. So, I mean, they were outside, and it's like, hey man, like we need to do a little bit of all of these things every single day. And my experience in working with people as they age, even with the clients that I've been privileged enough to work with until they die, I get to hear about all their successes, but I get to hear about all their regrets too, right? I watch how these things allow them to get the most out of their last years when they finally embrace doing all of these things. And then I also watch them have the epiphany where they realize they could have always been doing all of these things. How much richer might their life have been, even if they have a stack full of money, because they haven't done all of these things. That money doesn't have the value that it did to them. They would give all of it to me if they could walk again. If they could not have cancer, which, by the way, how many types of exercise have been shown to be one of your best ways of fighting off getting cancer, right? Some things just happen, right? We don't always have an explanation as to why God moves in mysterious ways. Sometimes people get sick. I'm not blaming the person for getting sick.
Well, my last episode was with Pastor Pole, and he said, I was talking to him about farming and his idea of regenerative farming that he does. And he said, oftentimes, if you do the thing God wants you to do with the thing that God made, it just kind of works itself out.
Wow, I love that.
And it's so you gave me arms to grab stuff and hold things and people and babies, and you gave me legs to move forwards. Not just an ass to sit on, right? But the glute is what drives you forwards, right? And
in fact, you didn't give me my lazy boy. I bought that.
Yeah. And so, to your point, what is a full life? And Americans get caught in this rat race, whatever. And it's like a full life is playing pickleball or playing basketball with the church or doing these other things. And it's so funny. I have guys at church all the time asking me like, oh, let's get together. Let's do this. Let's go this. Let's go sit for coffee. Let's go do this. And I, a long time ago, I realized like, I came up with this little phrase. I was like, Jesus didn't ask the disciples to go sit at Starbucks with him. He asked them to walk with him. Right. And so they walked. Right.
Come follow me.
Come follow me. Yeah. And so, all right, that was great. I would say let's go a little bit. Another question I have for you is nicotine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So everybody's always said nicotine's awful. Nicotine's bad for you. It's addictive. It leads to cancer. It leads to this. Turns out there's a lot of studies coming out that all of this is not the full truth. Too much of anything is a bad thing, right?
There's a little bit of the poison in the antidote, right?
Exactly. Snake venom is, the snake venom solution is from snake venom, right? But you actually encouraged me to start taking some nicotine. So I did, and it's amazing. I feel amazing. I feel great. I found this one company that the smallest dosage I could get was 2 milligrams. Walk me through what you know about nicotine, why you recommended I start utilizing it within self-control.
Well, we put a few limits on that, right? Like I think what I told you was to try and stay below 15 milligrams.
Yeah.
And there's been a time where I wasn't able to stay below 15 milligrams. Like I did construction for a period of time, and I would dip, and I would have a can of dip in my a day.
You had the ring on your back pocket?
Sure. I mean, it's the same shape can, right, as the pouches come in.
Yeah.
But what I realized when I switched over to pouches is first I was doing 6 milligram pouches, and Okay, great. But I didn't realize until I added it up where I was like, wow, how much more nicotine was I used to taking in? When you're buying gum and patches and all this stuff, you start to go, wow, that's a lot of nicotine, right? And it really wasn't until I really weaned down that now if you gave me a 6 milligram nicotine pouch,
put you on your ass.
I would feel like I was about to throw up.
I did that for the first time at a wedding. The groom gave me one a month ago, and I had to run to the restroom.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me check to make sure this is still recording. It's going this time. That's great. Good news.
So think of it like there's this land of absolutes that a lot of us live in. Always do this, never do that. And if we think about it in terms like that, we could also say something like one man's drug is another man's medicine, right? So if I'm abusing nicotine like I once did, right? I'm beyond getting the positive benefits of nicotine. I'm actually harming myself and particularly if I'm using tobacco, because there's a lot of things in that aren't just in nicotine by itself, right? So, but I'm big on metacognition. I love to feel sharp, right? And it's not just because I'm always trying to read information and soak up knowledge. When I have a reason to go looking for details, what I use metacognition for is it like, say I'm really wanting to help you with something, right? We had talked about like your health history with your Crohn's, right? Well, I might need to read up a little bit on that while I'm trying to figure out how I can best help you and our fitness goals. I need to overlay some of that understanding. But when I go looking at it, if I'm in that place and I'm in that place of metacognition and my heart, mind, my spirit is aligned with helping you, it jumps off the page at me. I can go, oh, that's what I needed. Oh, that's what I needed, right? Which is different than trying to like memorize or retain all this information. It literally jumps off the page at me. And I was like, I knew that's why we needed to do that exercise first.
Yeah.
Right.
So what you're talking about too in taking too much versus taking the right amount is also, there's this concept that a lot of people had. What did Paul say in one of his letters? He said, all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial, right? And so it comes to the same idea that freedom is a gift, but freedom for those who lack self-control becomes poison, just like anything else. And so I think, whether it's nicotine, alcohol, any other stimulants or things we're doing, coffee, I don't know. I don't think you can eat too much meat, but some people think you can. But meat is actually, I did carnivore for 3 months, and that's what helped me reduce my Crohn's symptoms by 97%.
But see, what you're looking at is a 3-month cycle.
Right.
Right. That was helpful for that 3 months. It doesn't mean that you're always, right. But
I'm not on carnivore now.
You've got to be able to navigate and go, okay, you know what? If this is where I am, I might need to be all in order to turn the battleship around and go this direction. I might need to be all systems go and all in, and it might take a whole lot of energy and a whole lot of resources to turn that battleship around. But once the battleship is headed that way, now we're balanced. Now we're balanced, right? What else might we need to adjust, right? And so that's where that doing an inventory kind of comes in.
All right, so we've been going almost 2 hours now. One more question.
Sure.
And then we'll save the rest for the next episode.
Okay. Oh,
how about
great.
that?
All right. I'd love to come back.
You said something at the beginning of this really piqued my interest. You said emotional centers of the body, and that the body is carrying these, call them traumas, experiences. I know you and I in the past, years ago, talked about some epigenetic type stuff that's going on there. Yeah. A lot of people don't know that you can physically change your DNA over time. You can alter your own code by the diet you're eating, the sunlight you're exposing your to, the thoughts that you're having, all of these things. And so walk me through this idea. Feel free to go as detailed or undetailed as you want to. When you're talking about the emotional centers of the body and training the organs and getting this all aligned, what do you mean?
Okay, well, there might be some schools of thought that talk about chakras, right?
Ancient Chinese medicine type stuff.
Yeah, or even Hindu ideas and things, right? Where people have incorporated that into a religion. I think what makes it a little bit different.
And that goes back to what we were saying earlier. Truth is truth is truth. You learn a truth. With knowledge comes self-control, not creating
and I think
Hinduism out of that.
Exactly. I think the difference is that my understanding of the body is not my religion, right? I'm following Christ, and there is some truth to how this body is organized, this perfect design, right? And some people have separated that out by itself and worshiped the body in some way. And their understanding of how their religion works for them and how they do that may be different than ours. However, the fact that we put stress in our body, physical and emotional stress, are both stored in the body as same, right? That we know. Science says so, right? We can take that further and go, okay, this makes sense. I can look at places in my body that I didn't used to move as well, and now understand that there are facets of my personality that I express better in my body because those places move. What is that? Someone else may say, oh, that's because your root chakra, right? Okay, great. That's one lens of understanding. I do know that as my feet have gotten stronger, that my enzyme values in my liver were elevated for years. And I quit drinking 12 years ago. Okay. It wasn't until my feet got stronger and I started moving through my rib cage and doing more crawling pattern-based movements that I recognized that where my liver sits, it probably wasn't flushing because it never got to wring itself out. It didn't turn on its axis, right? So all of these little places that our organs sit, not only is the way that they function kicked on by locomotion and how we walk, but you'll see this when we have good intra-abdominal pressure, there's a good little space for each little part. Right? And sometimes you'll see that there's spaces in between them, but you wouldn't be able to describe why there's a space behind the heart or the lungs or the here or there without the understanding of pressure. I have intra-abdominal pressure. I can breathe. And when I'm breathing well, right? Like that's where the whole thing started anyway, if we want to go back to the book of Genesis on that one, right?
That's pretty good.
If I'm breathing while I take these steps, our steps are ordered, right? There's some kind of thing where God takes over. If I'm breathing good and doing this, that, we can write all these different amazing books about that. We can talk about this chakra and that chakra and blah, blah, blah. Where are we describing this from, right? So when the epigenetics part that you mentioned a second ago, when I can be in balance with the electromagnetic field of the earth, some people call that grounding, it's a thing, right? Because this whole, whether we look at quantum physics or whatever else, this whole thing is a fractal that we're in, which is exactly how when you train yourself to you or I train myself to me, it makes sense that the palm of my hand is the sole of my foot, is the arch of my neck, is the arch of my back.
What do you mean?
There's a ratio there. There's a whether we want to call it the golden ratio or talk about the Fibonacci sequence or any of these things, when you see a fetus, the body fits inside the fetus in a perfect ball, right? And it's got a ratio of all of its parts. And so that's where, when I do a crawling pattern, for example, my foot recognizes it's doing the same thing my hand is, and my hand recognizes it's doing the same thing my foot is. Okay, well, there's the learning, right? That they're both doing the same thing. And so then there becomes a relationship where I have a relationship between my foot and my hand, right? Well, there's part of that is going to be a genetic thing. But if I think about a coiling pattern, what is the pattern of DNA? Does the sun and the planets move through space, right? All of that is the same. That's a coiling pattern, right? That is a fractal. And so there's a coherence that happens with your body. And I'm not the foremost expert on DNA by any means. That's not, but I'm like a B or a C student in like 1,500 things, right? So I know enough to go, I don't need to know everything there is to know about that. I know if I go like this, it's right.
Of 80% of things.
That's right. If I go like this, that does what? Okay, cool. I'll get back to you on that. Keep writing that book. I'm going to go do it. Right? I'm going to go keep doing it. And from doing, learning from doing, we get a lot of those things. We want to talk about epigenetics. I knew that when I was in South Florida training polo players, crawling on the polo field and pushing a sled every day, and then I came home and conceived my daughter with my wife, I knew that baby was going to come out strong, right? She was getting that information. The information that went into my wife on what that child needs to be ready for this world when it comes out. If she came out going, well, man, I better be able, okay, this is who's coming into the world in this blessing, right? And
it's interesting. My first couple kids were much chubbier than my last two kids. I have four. And the last one in particular, my wife was she's come a long way. She's had a lot of, her family didn't necessarily take part in any fitness activities, not sports or anything. And so obviously that changed when she married me. I'm a very active guy, and she was active and a doer. You know, she's always been a doer, but getting strong was something that she started during and after her third pregnancy. Well, right before we conceived our fourth, she was the strongest she's ever been. She also maintained working out 4 or 5 times a week throughout her fourth pregnancy. That baby came out, not only was her pushing 11 minutes long versus hours and days for the first one, but that baby came out literally out of the pool and went like this. I'd never seen anything like it. It was insane. Even the midwives were like, holy shit. That they hadn't even seen anything like that before. And so, like, to your point in that epigenetics, what we do, how do you always say it? What do you say? How we do
anything is how we do everything.
How we do anything is how we do everything. That's great. And that is something that is a truth that is true. And it does pass down into your DNA and change everything. The way your bones are shaped in your face, the way you think impacts the way your jaw sits.
And I think they've been able to trace it. Don't quote me on this, but I think they've been able to trace it about 5 generations back, right? So what we're talking about is the micro of like, okay, cool. What I'm doing now, we're going to have this baby this year. Well, what did my dad do? What did his dad do? What did his dad's dad do, right? Like we can go all the way back, and all of that information is then assimilated to be like, well, this child needs to have these qualities because it's the way the world is. I mean, and it's our biology's best guess at what's right. And then there's the environment that, that it actually gets thrown into that does the rest. Like the subconscious learning. My son knows that every day that he wakes up, dad has already gone outside, either taken an ice bath, gone for a run, whatever, before I wake him up. He knows that. In fact, sometimes my hands are cold and I put them on his face and I wake him up like that. But there is a part of that his DNA is learning, going, oh man, that's what that's what
we do.
That's what we do, right? Dad's already gotten up and done hard stuff, right? That's how we have a place to live, is that dad gets up and does that. And dad's actually providing an environment for me where I don't have to do that yet, but that's what's coming, right? And he's going to look back at that. And when I am starting to hold him accountable to his exercise and the things that he does as he gets bigger, I'm going to have some credit, right? I'm going to have some street cred with my son, because he's going to be like, well, Dad's always done these things. And what I've noticed is that now, like the other day before his basketball game, he comes outside. He's like, Dad, I want to push the sled with you. Dad, can I push the sled with you? I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. In fact, I had to tell him when to quit because he had a game, and we had to just, I said, this is how you train for a game. When it's not game day, we've got something else that we'll do. But sled work before a game looks like this on game day. This is how the pros do it, son. And he had the best game of his whole season that day, right? But that's the thing, is to keep it's the environment. Look at all these amazing things you have here, right? It's creating the environment. Like, I thought that was great. You were showing me that video where your kids were playing with their microphones, right? They're going to learn some of these things that you do just from being around it, just from being exposed to these things. There's a learning that they're always learning more by watching than any other way. And the other part of that is that when me, you, and 2-3 other guys get together, or like the other day when it was me, you, and Daniel, right? Now we've got 3 of us. There's a way that you're going to see me do something. There's a way you're going to see him do something, and we're both watching you, and we're all learning from each other in that. And that's more of like a herd, like in polo and in horse training. When there's a horse that won't quite come along, one of the things that normally fixes that is they take that horse and they put him with a couple of other horses that are doing it well.
They do the same thing in hunting with dogs.
Okay.
Same thing, is they take the pup out, and you don't have to do much training if you just stick the pup with the 12-year-old veteran, right? They just figure it out.
And so likewise, many of these woes that we have, oh, that's my bad knee, or everybody in my family tends to have problems with their knees. Well, you guys all learn to walk from looking at each other. Mm. You guys all picked up on that stuff. Everybody in my family, because you guys all sit like that. Because right? How much of that is just bad patterning? I don't want to say good or bad necessarily, but dysfunctional movement patterns that we share in families are a thing, right? Like if you grow up and your dad has a limp because he worked in a factory and hurt his back a long time ago, you might still kind of walk like that, even though you don't have that problem. I see it all the time, right? I learned to walk watching my mom because my dad wasn't necessarily around to be that example. And I recognize that a lot of the ways in the movement, I'm going, man, my mom walks like that. My mom does that thing, right? That's where I learned it, right? And I remember riding my bike on the street, and my mom would be running, going, come on. I'd be trying to pedal to catch up. My mom be running. But we learn not just from those things where I can consciously recall, but all of the subconscious and the learning that takes place. There is something that we learn from each other. And sometimes what we're doing when we're coaching is that we're relearning. And going, if I can learn, I can relearn. Mm-hmm. Right? But the way that I go about it is the same way that I learned it in the first place. And that's walking, crawling patterns, create walking if we want to clean up the walking. But we can't replace sitting hours and hours and hours and not walking. There's not a way to overcome that, no matter what workout someone's going to pick with the time that they have. Along with all of that, the walking things is that I ask people to allocate more time than what they think. Like, that's great if you can squeeze out an hour, but a lot of times we're working too hard. This thing of time that we overlay on everything. I want to get it all done right now. I have an hour, blah, 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 blah. What we need to learn with the time that we have is the most efficient, easiest way. And sometimes, if we've gone years without exercise, we might need to start off with 2 hours. And Well, I find this a lot of times when I'm helping guys, like how many friends do you know that are big time sports fans, right? They never miss a game. They might even play their fantasy league or whatever else they're doing, right? And that's all great. But then they want to tell me that 2 hours, well, who has that kind of time? We're going, look, dude, who has time to play fantasy baseball, right? How many baseball games are there, right? So, and it's making it a priority, and then it becomes part of your life, but it has to be something that you just have a commitment to, which may be discipline at first. I don't look at what I do every day as discipline, and I haven't for a long time. You know why? Because it's fun. There's joy in the process. I enjoy working out. Now, when do I not enjoy working out? When I think of the times when I haven't done it in a while. I'm not in good shape. It's real easy to find new ways to challenge myself and be okay in the humility of finding where those places are when it's not everything I try to do, I'm terrible at. Mm-hmm. Right? Until you get good at doing a handful of things, it isn't fun. But that's a place to overcome. It's not a place to always be. And so many people start and stop, start and stop, and start and stop. And if someone's just doing 2 or 3 hours a week, they may never get to that place where exercise feels good, like when me and you do it and go, man, I had this great workout last night or this morning, or I really felt that new thing I was trying to do with my shoulder, or whatever the thing may be. That place of discovery and awe, it's still a chore for them. It's still something that they're doing to check the box. And until it becomes something that we find joy in, we're not, in my view, we're not doing the essence of what it is. If I can't find joy in doing the things that take care of myself and then make practice out of play, like what's allowed me to do is that if I'm having fun when I exercise and I'm doing the things with my body and enjoying it, when my son goes, hey, Dad, you want to play basketball after school if I have time? Yeah. Of course, yeah, let's play. Cool. Yeah, that's going to be fun. If my knees hurt and my back hurts and my feet hurt and my neck hurts, or I'm just not that good and I'm embarrassing myself in front of my son, so I'd rather just not. I'll just watch you play, son. Right? Like, what are the other options that dads end up doing? Right? And I was already, being 45 and having an 8-year-old and having a 16-month-old, like I'm an old dad compared to some of the other guys. But what my experience is when I show up to help coach the Little League team or the flag football team,
Cub Scouts,
right? I'm somehow one of the only dads that can do the thing. Like, I'll show them, of course, in Cub Scouts, Fitness Week gets turned over to me. That's my wheelhouse, right? But I'm amazed at it. So as Christians, I think that we know we're called to provide. That's a thing. Absolutely is. But I think we have this spurious connection that we have to just sacrifice our body to do this thing that's providing. And we justify not taking care of ourselves as a means to an end. Well, that's just what it takes because I'm all about my job. And I would say that who I am extends to what I do for a living that people pay me for. But I don't walk around saying, hi, I'm Pate and I'm a coach, right? Who I am is what I share with people in my field to help them get better. But I don't define myself by my occupation, right? It's one facet of who I am.
It just happens to be how you make money.
It happens to be how I make money, right? And so there's been times when I've been in, a small talk conversation at a party or, get together or something. And, and there's always those couple of guys that, that want to talk about their TPS reports or whatever the thing is, right? About their job. Oh yeah, things are going really good. Looks like we're going to get the contract with such and such. And man, I've been working on this project and cool. And so what I normally do to make a point is like, yeah, I've really been trying to work on making sure that, my hip does 360 degrees and my shoulder does 720 degrees. And I really try and get my clients to be able to, like, I start talking about the body and workouts and they're like, well, I'm like, yeah, pull-ups and dips and Bulgarian split squats. And they're like, oh, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I'm like, well, dude, when I say, how are you? How are you? By the way, I think how are you is the only phrase that's in every single language. How are you is a thing, right? How are you? I'm not talking about your job. I want to connect, hopefully at a higher level than that, right? But my experience with other Christians that I speak with is that they put all of their eggs in this providing basket, and people don't realize how weak they are. People don't realize, because it all sort of happens at once, right? You can find a way the body can compensate 1,000 different ways, and that's just this or that's just that, and then all of a sudden you turn 50 or 60 and you go to the doctor one day because everything's a mess, right? That people don't realize that it feels like the castle crumbles all at one time. That castle made of sand.
Yeah. Well, it's not only that, but also you see even one of the stories that has always blown my mind in the Bible that I don't know, I'm weird, but Jacob, when he's traveling and the angel of the Lord comes to wrestle with him, right? Not only was he able to keep up with the angel of the Lord, which is a Christophany, which is Christ coming down before Jesus' inception as human through Mary, but is he physically wrestling with God? But it says before that he was sleeping with his head on a rock. And that has always sounded so uncomfortable to me. I'm like, how the heck did he fall asleep with his head on a rock like a pillow? And it says it in such a matter-of-fact, simple way. And it's always struck out to me because I'm like, I know my body is not right because I cannot fall asleep with my head on a rock.
Sure.
And so Abraham, it says that when his brother Lot was stolen by a nearby king, that he took his 300 trained men in his household and went and fought and stole his brother back. Paul, shipwrecked, swam across the Mediterranean Sea to an island. Jesus walked all over the place. All of these guys, who was it? Elijah ran alongside horse chariots.
And how about them Jesus abs, huh? How about them Jesus abs, right?
Yeah, but I mean, in order to be the feet of Jesus, to walk and take the gospel, you got to be able to physically do it too. And so we'll do this again. But Pate, I got a new phrase that I'm telling people.
Okay.
Shut your mouth, breathe through your nose. Until next time, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Walker.
Yeah. That was a lot of talking.
Yeah. We can do that forever.